It's dynamic content time. Let's get to work. What's up, people? MisterToolbox back with another Amazon Lumberyard video. It's part 3 of our look at the cloud gems, and today it's all about dynamic content. I know I said this in the other 2 cloud gem videos, but for anyone who may have missed those, I did the initial cloud canvas setup on Lumberyard 1.7. I have gone back now that I'm on Lumberyard 1.8 and checked that video. Everything in there still holds true, so if you followed along at the time with 1.7, you are good to go for this, as long as you're on Lumberyard 1.8. Of course, we need Lumberyard 1.8 because the cloud gems and the cloud gem portal were both introduced in that release. As tradition dictates, I've jumped into the project configurator. I want to make sure I've got cloud gem samples clicked, that it's checked. Go ahead and give a click on set as default just to make sure we're good to go. Then we can close this up. With that buttoned up, I can pop open the editor. I'm going to click open level, expand levels, expand cloud gem tests, and give a click on dynamic content test. Click open, let that load up. Before we start uploading and downloading, let's do a couple of checks, make sure the AWS stuff is set up properly. So we'll come up to the menu, click AWS, click Credentials Manager. Make sure you have a profile in here. It'll say Cloud Canvas Administrator. If you followed along with me, it might say Cloud Canvas Admin, depending on how intelligible I was. Or if you did this on your own, whatever that profile is that you set up, make sure that that's in there, that the radio button's ticked, and we can click Cancel there. Let's also take a look, make sure our resources are uploaded to AWS. So we'll go ahead up in the menu bar, click AWS, expand Cloud Canvas, and click Cloud Canvas Resource Manager. This will load up. You see Create Completes in here in the resource groups. You're probably in good shape. You can also expand administration, expand deployments. Make sure you've got at least one deployment set up and active as the default. You can see mine says Create Complete. Over here in the status column, I am good to go. If either of those are not the case, go ahead and either create a deployment, you'll see a button for that, or just click Upload All Resources. It'll ask you for a deployment name. That'll take some time, let that finish, and then we can move on. Now that we've got everything verified, let's go ahead and open up the Cloud Gem portal. We'll do that by clicking AWS up in the menu, coming down to Open Cloud Gem Portal, giving that a click. That popped open on my second screen, so let me drag that over. And there we go, there's my Cloud Gem portal. I'll click Cloud Gems up in the top right corner. We'll see the 3 current Cloud Gems, leaderboard, message of the day, and the one we're after, dynamic content. I'm going to give that a click. So you'll notice I have 2 files here by default. They come with the Cloud Gem Samples project. One is the dynamic content test.manifest. That is the manifest file that describes the rest of the files. And then we have the .shared, which actually contains the files. We'll go ahead and look at how those are created and uploaded in just a sec. So I shoved that portal out of the way. Let's go ahead and give this a test, see what it does. Click out in the perspective viewport, press Ctrl-G to start. You'll see we've got my data floating on a canvas in the center of the screen. I can click Update. Nothing really happens on the canvas. There is some stuff that goes by in the console. One word of warning about the console in this sample level, it will debug print out the full account number of your AWS account when you do a fetch for dynamic content. So be careful when you're running this if you are at all sensitive about your account number. I'm probably going to keep the console shrunk down just for safety's sake. I think it probably makes sense now to take a look at the Lua script that drives this. So that's what we're going to do. Got one entity in this scene, so we'll go ahead and click Entity 1. And then over on the right-hand side, we'll find our script and we'll click the braces on the side to open up the Lua editor. So we won't take this from top down, but sort of more logically if we can. And we're going to start here on line 17 with onActivate. Like all the rest of the samples, this Lua script is tied to an entity and activates when the game activates. And it's doing the same sort of thing, finding a canvas it's going to bind to, listening for action strings on that canvas. Those are on lines 23 to 25, showing the mouse cursor. And then it's jumping on 2 event buses, the dynamic content update bus and the static data update bus. Those are different. We'll have to take a look at that. Then it's making a call to self update game properties. We'll find that up on line 9. So on line 9 we have the update game properties function. What it does is checks the static data request bus for an event. If there isn't one, what it'll do is tell you that on the console and then return. If there is, what it does is drops an event on the static data request bus, event bus, to load a relative file. We'll find that on our disk in just a moment. Right now it's pointed at a CSV that has one line. Down on line 36 we have the type reloaded function. That's actually an event listener on the static data request bus. So when you drop this event to load the relative file, when that is loaded, what you'll see is debug log telling you that the static data type is reloaded, tell you the output file, and then given that game properties is the name of the file we're working with, it'll make a call to update text down below on line 39. If you're curious how the static data handling is done, you'll find the code for that gem in dev gems static data code source. The type reloaded function that we were just talking about is in the static data manager. Out of the type reloaded function, we're making a call to update text, which we'll find here on line 43. What that does is sets display entity equal to an element on the UI canvas we see when we launch the level. Declares local variable to track the success of the request, and then declares one for the return value, and drops an event on the static data request bus to get a string value out of a CSV file. In our case, it's the game properties file. It's checking for the dynamic message key and then grabbing the value from that, which is in the next column over. We'll take a look at the structure of that file in just a sec. Once it's got those, it sends a log to the console and then drops an event on the UI canvas event bus to set the text of the display entity. On line 51, we've got the new pack content ready function. That is again an event handler, this time on the dynamic content event bus. That does is finds new pack content, logs it to the console, and then invokes update game properties, which will start that flow we saw earlier, where we download that new data to disk, load the relative file, which then causes type reloaded to fire, and then eventually will fire update text to update the text on our UI canvas. Down on line 56, we've got the onAction function that handles action strings from the UI canvas. In this case, there's only one. It's the button pressed action string. If that is clicked, then checks to see if there's anything on the dynamic content request bus. If there is not, then we'll get a debug log telling us so, and the function will return. If there is, then it's going to drop the event to request the new manifest onto the dynamic content request bus, and then make a call to update text, which we just saw a moment ago. I popped Atom open just so we can take a peek at the C++. I don't want to go too far into the weeds here, but I'm in dev gems cloud gem dynamic content code source, and then I've got the dynamic content transfer manager file open. So that request manifest ends up making a call to update the manifest on line 252. That will eventually, if there is a new manifest file indicating that there's new content, we'll add the pending pack to the download list. It'll end up getting downloaded, and then eventually we'll fire this eBus event that says new pack content is ready. You can take a look at this code if you like. It's actually really well put together. I'd like to spend many videos talking about C++, but broad strokes, that's kind of how the flow goes behind the scenes for the dynamic content updates. Alright, that's all for code for now. If your eyes aren't watering out of boredom, I appreciate you sticking around with me. Let's again jump into the perspective view. We'll give it a click. We'll press Ctrl G just to see what this does one more time. So we see the My Data. We can click Update. We can see that we've got dynamic messages coming in. Let's go ahead and see how that's set up in the background. I've got Windows Explorer open. There's two directories worth looking into. We've got this dynamic content and static data. I should mention I'm in the root of the CloudGem samples directory. So let's take a look first at dynamic content. Give that a click. We've got the manifests and we've got the packs. Let's check the manifests first. We'll see a simple JSON file that's got the manifest for our dynamic content pack. In the packs directory, we've got two packs, one that contains the manifest and one that ends in .shared. You remember our CloudGem portal that correlates to the two files we saw there. If we take a look in the static data folder, we'll see a directory called CSV, and inside of that we have a CSV called game properties. I right click that and click edit. We'll see something pretty simple. It's just key value. Got game property for the first column, value for the second. And we have one line worth of data. Dynamic message is the game property, and the value is set to my data. So the tinkerer in me says, let's break that. I'm going to edit this file while I've got it open, and I'll just say my data 1. Click file, give that a save, close it up. Let's jump back into the Lumberyard editor, click in the perspective viewport and press Ctrl G. So you can see we have my data 1 on the UI canvas now. As we saw when we launched the Lua editor and took a look through that, the first thing this script does when it fires is checks for static data and loads it. And that's why we saw that my data 1. That wasn't loading dynamic content, that was loading right off of the file system, that file we just edited. We can change that one more time and see that in action. Back in that CSV directory, we will edit game properties, and let's delete this entirely and say hello world. Give that a quick save. Pop open the Lumberyard editor and give it a run. There it is, hello world. So that again is loading from the static data on our disk, not from the cloud. So that's sort of a letdown, right? This is just loading static data. That's not very special. Let's see what happens if we rename this static data folder so that the Lumberyard editor doesn't know where to find it. So I'll just append a underscore back to it, and then the editor won't know where that is because the static data directory just doesn't exist anymore. Get that out of the way. Back in the perspective viewport, we'll give it a click and press Ctrl G. Now we see we have nothing on the UI canvas. I'm going to go ahead and click Update. You'll see we've got my data again. That wasn't loading out of the static data. That is loading from the cloud. If we pull the console up a bit, you can actually see that in action. We've got up above this a couple requests to download files. They've got security tokens and stuff, so I'll leave them off screen. But you can see that we've got our dynamic content pack set to updating, and then it flips over to ready once it's updated, and then it mounts, and then we can get that my data dynamic message out of our dynamic content. So let's go ahead and update the dynamic content on the server. First thing we need to do to make that work is get our static data directory back to where it should be. Got that done. Go ahead and open up that game properties file. Change this one more time just to make sure we're working with new content. We'll set this to let's get to work. Give that a save. Close it up. And then we are going to head into the Dynamic Content Manager. We'll find that under AWS, Cloud Canvas, Dynamic Content Manager. Once that opens up, it won't have a manifest selected, so let's click this drop down. We'll click this dynamic content test.json. It'll load up. Over on the left hand side, we'll see our local files. That gameproperties.csv is the file we've been working with. And over here, we'll see the actual pack file. See, we have an exclamation. That's because we've updated it. Let's go ahead and click Upload Packages. All right, triangle's gone. We are good to go. Before we give this a run, I want to jump back into the root of this CloudGem samples project and just rename this static data directory so that it is not being loaded when we start running our game. So again, just append it back to it or just rename it to gibberish. Just remember what it is. So let's give this a run and see what happens now. Click out in the perspective viewport, press Ctrl G. We'll see we've got nothing on the canvas because the static data is gone. And when we click update, we get file status failed. Let's figure out why that is. Jump back into the Cloud Gem portal, head over to Cloud Gems, pop open the dynamic content, and what we'll see is that our packs are now private, whereas they used to be public. So let's change that. Click the gear, you'll see this transition up at the top. Move content from stage private, click that drop down, drop it back in public. If we click to save, we'll see it shoved back over there. With that out of the way, let's give this one more test. Click out in the perspective viewport, press Ctrl G. Again, we've got nothing on the canvas because our static data is gone. This time when we click update, let's get to work. I like it. So that may seem like kind of a pain in the butt that the new updates end up private instead of public. I think it's actually kind of nice. It'll save you from yourself if you make an error, if you upload something you shouldn't. You want to double check it in staging, something like that. So just remember, if you do make any updates to your dynamic content that will shift it over to private, you need to get it back over into the public bucket before you'll be able to see it in this Cloud Gem samples. All right, one and all, I know that was kind of Lua heavy again, but I find these really interesting. I hope that kind of little dive into code is helpful for someone. I think what we'll do next time to wrap up this look at Cloud Canvas is we'll build our own project. We'll incorporate pieces of each of these Cloud Gems, see how we go from zero to cloud, as everyone likes to say, and go over the trials and tribulations of getting that wired up. As always, I've been Mr. Toolbox. Please join the Lumberyard Community Slack channel. The link is down in the description to this video and every other video I make. Conversation again is rolling on. I love it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, say a prayer to the dread gods of old. Do whatever you do on YouTube's, but share this stuff. If you find this content helpful, please do let me know. I'd love for some feedback on the looks at code, things like that, because I really would love to dive into that. I don't want to bore people if there's more helpful stuff we could be doing. So I'm going to rely on your feedback for that. Anyway, that's all I got. Laters.